Welcome everyone to my full Furina guide. In this guide, I will firstly give a brief kit overview, then move on to artifacts, substats, and energy requirements. Then go over weapons, afterwards teams and constellation overview, and I will stop at C6 to give a brief C6 guide, comparing weapons and artifacts and slightly tap on teams. Keep in mind that Furina is still not released, and there are many things that may change. This is not a re-upload. This is an updated version since my original video got taken down. Without further ado, let's jump right into her kit. Furina has a crit rate ascension bonus and has a very high base HP. Normal attacks for a general Furina build aren't really that important, but her charged attack is an interesting part of her kit. When Furina charge attacks, her Archie alignment changes. The default starting alignment is Ausia. Every 6 seconds, Furina will deal Archie-aligned Hydro DMG. Furina's elemental skill is the core of her kit. Depending on the Archie alignment, Furina will summon creatures to fight alongside you when you cast the elemental skill. When in Ausia, she will summon 3 creatures to deal hydro damage to your active target. Each creature has its own damage multiplier and attack interval. If your party members have above 50% HP, these summons will consume HP and increase their damage based on how many characters' HP is being consumed. Furina's hydro application is by no means strong like Yelan or Xingqiu. For example, with Hu Tao, you won't be able to vaporize every hit with Furina since her hydro application is not fast enough to keep up with Hu Tao. This also applies to other teams, so it's something to keep in mind when choosing teams. When in Pneuma, a healing creature will be summoned, healing your active character. All summons have the same duration and can be switched by charge attacking with Furina. Furina's skill has a 30-second duration and a 20-second cooldown, so it has a 100% uptime. Furina's elemental burst is where her damage-boosting abilities come from. When any party member's HP changes, Furina will gain 1 fanfare point for each 1% change in HP. The number of fanfare points you gain will be multiplied by 0.23% at level 9 to give you the damage boost. Through fanfare points, you also gain healing bonus. For example, if you gain 100 fanfare points, you will gain a 23% damage bonus. I will go over how many fanfare points you can gain later. The maximum number of fanfare points you can gain at C0 is 300 points, and the number of fanfare points gained in the first burst cannot be transferred to the second burst. This skill has a 60 energy cost and 100% uptime. Moving on to passives, the first passive decreases the cooldown of underwater skills. Her second passive, Endless Waltz, allows Furina to share healing from any other character besides Furina to another party member. This only activates if the current active character gets fully healed. Furina will then heal 2% of any party member's HP once every 2 seconds in a 4-second window, meaning when this triggers, one of your characters will regain 4% of their HP over 4 seconds. Furina's third passive, depending on your Archie alignment, has different effects. When in Ausia, for every 1000 points of HP Furina, you will gain a 0.7% damage bonus to her elemental skill summons, stacking to a maximum of 28% bonus. To fully stack this bonus, you will need 40,000 HP. With Pneuma, for every 1000 points of HP, the intervals between heals you receive will decrease, meaning more heals. With that explanation, her talent's priority should be to level up her elemental skill and burst equally, and her normal attacks don't really matter, especially if you don't have her C6, which infuses normal attacks with Hydro. My general recommendation is to level her skill, but if you just want to use her for her buff, then prioritize leveling her burst. With that said, what does Furina really do? Furina in most teams is going to be a Hydro sub DPS and a burst support. You will use her to apply Hydro and buff your damage through her burst. A very important thing to note is that Furina only buffs characters' personal damage, so damage coming from Vaporize and Melt will be buffed since it is damage coming directly off a character. Transformative reactions such as Bloom will not benefit from Furina's burst, as this damage is not directly coming from a character. Hydro supports in general are very strong since they fit into many teams. When compared to a Hydro 5-star like Yelan, she will most likely give you a bigger buff, but will lose out on Hydro applications. Her and any Hydro character's value increases or decreases depending on how many other Hydro supports you have. Furina overall as a character seems to be mixing aspects of other Hydro characters in one package, but with worse healing and Hydro application. It does make her very flexible and a great damage buffing unit, but that is all without considering that her damage buff capabilities will require you to run a healer most of the time and have a character that can change their own HP. So with the added downside of requiring a healer, you will have to decide for yourself whether or not you can fit her into your teams. For example, if you're running a team without any characters that can consume their own HP, Kazuha most of the time will be able to give a stronger buff, since Furina's buff will require you to lose large amounts of HP during her burst duration. Other teams like a Nilou team, where you would replace Kokomi with Furina, will result in worse performance, because Furina does not buff bloom damage and won't be able to both heal and apply Hydro. So again, this is something to consider when pulling for Furina. Let me just summarize this quickly. Furina has great damage buffing capabilities, weaker Hydro application, and can switch the Hydro application to healing, but requires you to run a healer in most teams. My personal opinion is that Furina is going to be a strong unit in teams that can make use of a Hydro unit, although some teams will be better off without running Furina. I think she is a decent pull, but that may not be the same for everyone. But feel free to pull for whoever you like. You will still have fun even if you're not playing the most optimal meta teams. Moving on to artifacts. Furina's best option would be Golden Troop. Golden Troop increases elemental skill damage by 45%, and when your character is off-field, you will gain an extra 25% damage bonus, to a total of 70% bonus damage to your elemental skill. Marechaussee Hunter, although a great artifact set, and her best option if you are normal attacking with C6, does not increase her summons damage. The bonus crit rate from Marechaussee Hunter cannot be triggered when you are off-field, meaning her elemental skill summons won't get the extra crit rate when you're not on-field, making it suboptimal for an off-field support Furina. Another set that looks good is Vurukasha's Glow, but it does not work on Furina. Since the set requires your character to get damaged, Furina does not damage herself. She consumes HP, and that does not trigger the set bonus. Golden Troop is her best option, but if you don't have a full set, you can mix 2-piece HP or Hydro or even Energy Recharge sets. Aside from damage sets, Tenacity of the Millilith or Noblesse Oblige are excellent support sets. Tenacity being better in my opinion, since it increases your HP and therefore damage, and the attack buff comes from your elemental skill, so it's easier to procy compared to Noblesse Oblige, which requires using your burst. But should you go for a buffing set or a damage set, that answer depends on you. If you're using Furina in a team to provide as much buffs as possible to a single character, then going for Tenacity of the Millilith or Noblesse Oblige would be the route to go. But my personal recommendation would be going for a damage type set, especially Golden Troop, since the damage Furina's elemental skill deals is decent enough for you to build for. Moving on to stats, I would firstly like to explain why you need a lot of energy recharge. Although Furina has a 60 energy burst cost, Furina's elemental skill summons generates very few particles, similar to Yae Miko's energy generation. And since you will be spending most of the time with Furina off-field, since she is a support, you will gain very little energy. As a general target, you should aim for around 180 to 190% energy recharge. This target is just a rough estimate, and you will likely run her with another Hydro unit to generate energy. With a Hydro support and Favonius on your other Hydro unit, you should be aiming for around 160%. Of course, these requirements are highly dependent on your own team. For main stats with Furina, you will want an HP % Sans, since her summon scale of HP, and most of her kit does. Or you can go for an energy recharge Sans if you don't have an energy recharge weapon or lack the substats. The best main stat for her goblet is HP %, not Hydro. Since she gains a lot of damage bonuses from her passive and artifact sets, the Hydro damage bonus does not scale as well as HP bonus. In most scenarios, you will want an HP goblet, except when the sword you're using has an HP substat, or if you're using two 2-piece HP sets, then it will be better to go for a Hydro bonus goblet. Generally, an HP % goblet is better until you reach 40,000 HP. Above that point, Furina's passive skill does not benefit anymore, and you will likely be better off with a Hydro goblet. But in most cases, you can just decide based on substats. As for Circlet, go for either crit rate or damage, whichever you need more of. Moving on to substats, energy recharge should be your main priority until you reach your target. After you reach the energy recharge requirements, you will want to focus on both HP percent and crit rate and damage. Keep in mind that beyond 40,000 HP, Furina's passive won't increase the summon's damage anymore. Put it simply, the 4 substats you will be looking for are energy recharge, HP percent, and crit rate and damage. Furina has many weapons to choose from, both 5-star and free-to-play options. Keep in mind that other calculations may use different energy requirements. For this comparison, the requirement was 10 energy recharge rolls. These calculations are not accurate reflection of all builds, and your best weapons may vary a little. All weapons are assuming the maximum possible achievable stacks for each weapon, unless stated next to a weapon on the table, and with level 9 talents and 100 fanfare points from Furina's elemental burst. These damage numbers are nothing to take value off, just use them as a reference point. Starting with her signature weapon and her best in slot, Splendor of Tranquil Waters. Splendor of Tranquil Waters increases both elemental skill damage and max HP, alongside a high crit damage number, making it perfect for her. Primordial Jade Cutter is another great generalist sword, increases crit rate and max HP through its passive. Key of Kajnisut is another good option that increases HP by a lot, but there are a few things to keep in mind about Key, firstly being that you need a Hydro Goblet, and second is that it'll go over the 40,000 HP mark for Furina's passive, dropping its value with extra HP rolls, meaning that weapons that are close to Key such as Festering Desire will overtake Key of Kajnisut in most scenarios with high HP builds. Speaking of Festering Desire, it is the best 4-star option for Furina at Refinement 5. It increases elemental skill damage and crit rate, in addition to having an energy recharge substat. That being said, Festering Desire is an old event weapon that cannot be obtainable by newer players. But Furina has an entirely free-to-play option, being Fleuve Cendré Ferryman, the new Fontaine sword obtainable from fishing. Fleuve Cendré Ferryman is a really strong weapon. It provides energy recharge from its substat and increases elemental skill crit rate and energy recharge when using your elemental skill. It is also close to Festering Desire and can be refined for free. Wolf Fang, the new Battle Pass sword, is another great option for Furina, increasing her elemental skill crit rate and damage. With refinements, it can pass Refinement 5 Festering Desire, but it's only available from buying the Battle Pass. Skyward Blade, although increases energy recharge and grants 4 extra crit rate, it's not really recommended against other 4-star energy recharge swords. Favonius Sword is a great pick for support Furina as it can generate particles for every crit hit, but you will have to invest into crit rate more. The Dockhand's Assistant, although having an HP percent stat, does not provide much from its passive. In case you want to use it, both HP and Hydro Goblets perform the same, pick whichever has the better substats. Harbinger of Dawn could be really high up the list if not requiring you to be above 90% HP for its passive. Furina consumes HP from her summons, and it will be very hard to manage above 90% HP with Furina. Sacrificial Sword's passive is wasted on Furina since she generates particles from her summons, not her elemental skill cast, and has a 100% uptime on her elemental skill. Sacrificial Sword does not really do anything compared to other weapons such as Favonius. Weapons that are close to each other may rank differently for your own build, since each build has its own energy and crit values, and some weapons like Favonius may be more beneficial for certain teams than others. Feel free to pause and look at the comparison. Since Furina's damage buff comes from HP change, having a healer is going to be very important. But which healers should you use? I made a video regarding this topic where I used different healers, put them on field for around 5 seconds to allow for their on-field healing, and then switched off. And the result is that all healers are more than sufficient, and you should use whoever fits your team. But there are some healers who bring more benefits than others. Hydro healers, like Kokomi and Barbara, bring the Hydro resonance with them and can generate extra Hydro particles. Kokomi provides arguably the strongest off-field healing from her elemental skill, while Barbara can heal the whole party through her elemental burst. And since they're both catalysts, they can use Prototype Amber, which heals the whole party. Both are good, but you must keep in mind that Kokomi burst healing is strong, but requires some on-field time, while Barbara's elemental skill healing with no on-field is not that strong, and her burst requires heavy energy recharge investment. But both are strong and can be run very well with Furina. Another particularly strong healer is Bai Zhu. Baizu can heal the whole party through his elemental skill, which is really good for Furina, since the only requirement for this healing would be waiting for the cooldown. Not to mention his decent active character burst healing. Yao Yao has decent team-wide healing through her burst, but requires on field time, and her skill does not heal past 70% HP. Moving on to who I think is going to be one of the best options for many teams, Jean provides team-wide healing from her burst, and not to mention, she's an animo character and can equip Viridescent Venerer set, which reduces enemies' resistance. Jean can also heal the whole party through normal attacks from her passive. Sayu is a sort of 4-star Jean, but she has the same 70% HP healing cap, but her C1 ignores this restriction. You also have Bennett, who has the same 70% HP cap and only heals the active character. Charlotte is a healer that is going to be paired with Furina in the banner. She can heal the whole party from her burst, and since she's in the same banner as Furina, if you can get her Constellations, the healing will only get stronger. Other healers like Chi-Chi and Diona work fine with Furina. Mika is going to be a really decent option for some cryo teams, since he can heal the whole party and your active character. But overall, all healers are going to heal enough if you build them for it, so you shouldn't really choose based on who can generate the most points. You should choose based on who can fit your team the most. Moving on to teams, I want to firstly talk about Furina's Hydro application. Furina does not apply Hydro as well as other Hydro units, specifically Yelan and Xingqiu. So, for teams that need a lot of Hydro application like Hu Tao, Furina will have to be run with another Hydro unit. And speaking of Hu Tao, my initial thoughts regarding Furina was that they are not going to work well together, because Hu Tao's passive requires her to be under 50% HP. Furina, on the other hand, wants your characters to be above 50% HP and requires a healer. But if you fully ignore this passive and use Furina, Hu Tao could actually outdamage a regular Hu Tao team of Yelan, Xingqiu, and Zhongli. But it's not straightforward. With Furina, you will not be able to generate fanfare points through the beginning of your rotation, even though Hu Tao consumes her own HP. You will have to wait till the second or even third rotation to see better damage. But the same goes for a regular Hu Tao team, as you won't be able to get below 50% HP from the beginning. So, with Furina, you will want to play Hu Tao with another Hydro unit to firstly get the Hydro Resonance, which will benefit both Furina and Hu Tao as they both scale on HP, and secondly be able to consistently Vaporize, since Furina by herself does not apply enough Hydro for Hu Tao. Both Xingqiu or Yelan can fill this spot. And lastly, you will need a healer. The best healer for this team would be Jean with Viridescent Venerer set. Jean not only is one of the best healers with Furina, she can also provide resistance reduction. But you will need to swirl Pyro in order to make use of the resistance shred. Bennett can also work, but not as well as Jean, although he provides an attack buff which Hu Tao can use. His healing is not the best for Furina, since he does not have party-wide healing and does not heal past 70% HP. But with all that said and done, another question pops up. Would Marechaussee Hunter be a better set for Hu Tao in this team? And the short answer is no, and the long answer is you could use it, but it's not better than Shimenawa's Remanence or Crimson Witch of Flames. But if your substats are much better, you could use it. Liney is in similar situation to Furina, where his passive wants him to be run in teams with Pyro characters. If your team can keep enough Pyro on the enemies and not get affected by Furina's Hydro application, they could work well and be one of Liney's best teams. Although it may slightly outdamage other teams, it will not bring the same comfort as playing with Zhongli, who can shield, or Kazuha, who can buff and group. While we're on Fontaine characters, some of Neuvillette's better teams will come with Furina. Neuvillette on his own can both drain and consume large amounts of his HP. With multiple charged attacks, you could fully stack Furina's fanfare points. Neuvillette's passive increases his damage based on how many teammates are triggering Hydro reactions, up to a max of 3 buffs. Since Furina is Hydro, you will lose out on the third buff, but that is not a bad trade-off, since the buff you could possibly get from Furina is going to outweigh the third stack of Neuvillette's buff. With that said, a good team is going to consist of Neuvillette, Furina, and a healer who could react with Hydro and a flex spot. Kazuha is the best option for this flex spot. As for your healer, you could run Baizu just to heal and react with Hydro, or even Charlotte, who can apply off-field cryo and has decent enough healing. You could also switch this healer to Jean, but then you will most likely need to switch Kazuha to another unit, one that can still buff Neuvillette and react with Hydro. You could also run without any healer, but it's not something I would recommend. You could theoretically run without a healer and generate point just from Neuvillette, and use units who can buff Neuvillette in place of a healer. This team could possibly work, but it's not something I would recommend. Wriothesley Freeze with Furina is going to be another solid team, but with Wriothesley Freeze, you will likely want to run double cryo to active the cryo resonance and use an animo unit instead of another hydro unit, so Furina in this team is going to need a lot of energy. For your second cryo unit, you could run Shenhe, but then your animo unit or last unit will have to be a healer, preferably Jean. But the better combination would be to use a cryo healer and Kazuha in the last slot. Charlotte is going to be strong as a second cryo unit, since she can use Tenacity of the Millilith set and heal the whole party. Mika is also a possible option in this slot, especially with Constellations. He can buff Wriothesley's attack speed. But the better option would be Tenacity with Charlotte and Kazuha as a last slot. You could also just run double hydro and decrease your energy requirements. You could also run a Wriothesley melt team, but at that point Furina is just going to mess up reactions and you would be better off running other units. Aside from Wriothesley, Ayaka is another cryo character that can be run with Furina. Ayaka's best team is Shenhe, Kokomi, and Kazuha. With Furina, your damage will probably decrease, so if you already have Shenhe, Kazuha, and Kokomi, I would not recommend running an Ayaka team with Furina. But a possible team with Furina would be running Charlotte in place of Shenhe or Jean in place of Kazuha. Replacing Charlotte with Shenhe would be the higher damage option. Since Kazuha's buffs are valuable to Ayaka, Ayaka is a unit that is meant to be played as a burst DPS, so keep that in mind when choosing your. You could also run a 4-star freeze team with Furina, and you will still have the same team building options as Ayaka or Wriothesley. Moving on to Dendro teams, one thing that I would like to make clear is that Furina does not buff bloom damage. Bloom damage is considered a transformative reaction. Damage from reaction that does not directly come off from a character is considered transformative. Amplifying reactions like melt or freeze are affected by Furina, since they are triggered directly by a character's skills. So some bloom teams may not benefit from Furina, especially teams where no characters are dealing significant personal damage. The best example of this would be a Nilou team, where all of your damage would be coming off bloom damage. So in this team, Furina would not be bringing any benefits over a character like Kokomi, who can both heal and apply hydro. Furina, on the other hand, can only do one thing at a time. So specifically, for a Nilou team, I will not be recommending Furina over Barbara or Kokomi. Other Dendro teams, like Quickbloom and Hyperbloom, could work. With Hyperbloom, you will want a second hydro unit since having good hydro application is more important than damage for Hyperbloom teams. So, you will need a second hydro unit with Furina, but using Furina in this team could be a bit of a waste if you don't have a character that can use Furina's buff, since again Bloom and Hyperbloom damage does not get buffed by Furina. For example, with Alhaitham she could work, but she might feel like a bit of a waste when you can get another character like Nahida, or maybe a crowd control character. So she could work in a Hyperbloom, and your team will be able to clear content easily, but having Furina over other characters may not bring the most benefit to your team. The same also goes for Burgeon teams. Quickbloom, unlike the other Dendro teams, will work well with Furina. In these teams, you will be focusing more on Electro and Dendro reactions, Aggravate and Quicken, over Bloom damage. So having a Hydro buffer who does not apply a lot of Hydro is going to fit many teams. Although do take this with some caution, because I did not actually test any teams, and this is all assuming Furina's Hydro application is what's been spread around. So, with these teams, you could run Alhaitham with an Electro or Dendro healer and one more flex spot. You could run Fischl or Nahida or any other support character. Furina is going to be a decent choice for such teams, as you will buff your damage and get some occasional Hyperblooms. The same also goes with Signo. You could run him instead of Alhaitham, but you will need Baizu or Nahida to apply enough Dendro from off-field. Moving aside from Dendro, Furina could work in Vaporize teams, but the same restrictions still apply. If you're running Vaporize with Xiangling, you will need another Hydro unit to keep up the Hydro application, having another spot taken by another Hydro unit over a possible better support unit. But with that said, you could run a Vaporize team with Xiangling Furina, either Yellen or Xingui and Jean. But Xiangling in this team is going to need a lot of energy, so you could run Bennett instead of Jean. Although Bennett's healing is not optimal for Furina since he has a 70% HP healing cap. Raiden is a unit that can work with Furina without a lot of caveats. You could run a team of Raiden, Furina, and Jean. And your last spot can be either another Hydro unit, or Bennett possibly for playing Sunfire Jean, or Kuju Sara if you have her. Xiao is a unit who consumes his own HP. In a typical Xiao team, you will run him with Feruzan and Bennett, and your last spot is usually another Pyro character to activate the Pyro Resonance and bring utility or damage. You can play this team with Furina, swapping out your last Pyro unit. Furina in this team should theoretically be better, since she will be able to generate a large amount of points, but your healer in this team will be Bennett. And Bennett does not heal past 70%, and his healing is limited to your active character only, making the healing a bit difficult. It will have to be tested whether this team can reliably run Furina, but if it can't, you will need another healer and things get a bit complicated, since both Bennett and Feruzan are difficult to replace with Xiao, and Furina will be the only Hydro unit, making her energy investment really high. Moving on to Constellations, Furina's first constellation grants her 150 fanfare points from the beginning of her burst and raises the maximum number of fanfare points to 400. This constellation is really good. It gives a base damage bonus of 34.5% at the beginning of Furina's elemental burst, and it makes Furina much better in teams that can't consume HP like Fontaine teams, so you could theoretically run her in teams without a healer and still gain a decent buff. That is constant. I'm not recommending you do so, since you will be stuck at 50% HP, and some teams will struggle a lot like that. Her Constellation 2 increases the amount of fanfare points gained by 250%. This is not a 250% increase in damage. With this constellation, every fanfare point gained will be multiplied by 3.5 times. With teams and characters that can generate a lot of fanfare points like Neuvillette, you will exceed the maximum number of fanfare points, which is 400 with her C1. Once you pass the limit, each fanfare point above 400 will increase Furina's max HP by 0.35%, up to a maximum of 140% HP. The bonus HP gained can be huge, and will greatly increase her summon's damage and normal attack damage with Hydro Infusion if you have her C6. This is a really good constellation. It makes her buff much easier to get in more teams. And if you're going for constellations, her C2 is a good stopping point. Furina's Constellation 3 adds an additional 3 levels to her elemental burst. This is a nice upgrade to your burst's buff. Her Constellation 5 adds an additional 3 levels to her elemental skill. Furina's Constellation 4 improves her energy requirements. When her elemental skill summons deal damage or heal your active character, Furina will restore 4 energy. This can only happen once every 5 seconds. Her C4 drops her energy requirements by around 20%. This is a very nice constellation, but not one that you should be aiming for like her C2 or C1. Although it does decrease the amount of energy recharge you need and enable you to invest in other stats, Furina's C6 is really interesting. Her C6 gives Furina Hydro Infusion. When casting her elemental burst, this state is called Center of Attention, and the duration of her Hydro Infusion is 10 seconds. The normal attack's damage will be increased by 15% of max HP. Every 0.1 second, Furina can trigger an effect based on her Archie alignment, up to a maximum of 7 effects, and then the Hydro Infusion ends. That means that your actual duration is going to be around 7 seconds. When you have Uxia alignment, when Furina normal attacks, she will regenerate HP to the whole party. This HP regeneration is decent and enables you to run Furina without a healer. And with the added benefit of Hydro Infusion, she can drive many reaction-based teams, such as Electrocharged, Vaporize, and Bloom teams. This also makes her viable to run with Nilou in place of Kokomi. And the no-healer benefit can allow her to fit in many teams that would have lost out in damage because of the required healer, such as an Ayaka team, where with C0 Furina, you would have to run Charlotte as a healer alongside Furina. With C6, a healer is no longer required, so you can run Shenhe instead of Charlotte and allow your team to do the most damage. Her Numa alignment is more focused on her own damage through normal attacks. Her normal attack damage is increased by a further 20% of max HP, and normal attacks consume HP of all party members through her normal attack effect. I made a guide about running C6 Furina as a main damage dealer. You can watch it to learn more about her damage capabilities with C6. This Constellation 6 is amazing for Furina. It enables her to run without a healer and be the character normal attacking in reaction-based teams. This constellation enables different playstyles and possibly running without a healer. I made a full guide for her C6, but that is an older video and some weapon recommendation have changed with the updates made for Furina. But with that said, I will give a quick guide regarding her C6 Numa damage. If you're building Furina C6 as an on-field DPS, Furina can utilize Marechaussee Hunter as her Numa alignment drains HP during her C6 center of attention. The bonus crit rate you gain from Marechaussee Hunter is huge, and enough to outweigh other sets such as Heart of Depth and Gladiator's Finale. Nymph's Dream does not work that great for Furina, since her kit mostly scales on HP, and Nymph's Dream increases attack. You should not discard Golden Troop with C6. Her elemental summons can still deal large amounts of damage. Since her 6th constellation does not specify that the Hydro Infusion is considered elemental skill damage, she'll perform worse with Golden Troop as a main DPS compared to Marechaussee Hunter. Using a combination of HP Sands, Hydro Goblet, and crit damage, or possibly crit rate circlet, is the best for her C6 Penuma damage. An HP Goblet is still viable on weapons that don't increase HP. Weapons like Mist Splitter and Haran Gapaku can use an HP Goblet. The difference between a Hydro Goblet and an HP Goblet on some weapons is minimal and can be easily offset by better substats on an HP Goblet. For an on-field Furina, I would still suggest following the same talent priority of leveling skill and burst than normal attacks. Although her normal attack do contribute, it's very little and not something that will outweigh leveling her burst. You should still focus on the same substats. Energy recharge is still going to be important, but with Marechaussee Hunter, you won't have to put a lot of investment into crit rate, so building her does get a bit easier. You should look for energy, crit, and HP from substats. As for weapons, Splendor of Tranquil Waters is still her best option. Key of Kaj Nisut should be a close second since it provides a lot of HP, and can be even better if you're vaporizing since it provides elemental mastery. Primordial Jade Cutter is very close, but for Primordial Jade Cutter, you have to avoid every crit rate roll since you will overcap when you are using Marechaussee Hunter, no matter what you do. Harbinger of Dawn is not a weapon I would recommend if you're playing Furina, since you must keep your HP above 90%. And with a character who messes with your HP, that is going to be very tough. If you can manage to keep HP above 90%, it's going to be one of the best options out there. Crit damage weapons do get a bit favored with Marechaussee Hunter, so weapons like Blackcliff Longsword will perform better than crit rate weapons such as Black Sword and Wolf Fang. Black Sword being a better weapon for C6 normal attacking Furina. The Dockhand's Assistant, although it increases HP, does not perform very well with Furina on field. For a hypercarry Furina team, running her with another Hydro unit is still going to be beneficial. Running a Pyro unit like Xiangling will greatly increase your burst damage, and your last spot could be Kazuha. There is no healer in this team, because Furina at C6 could heal the whole party through her Hydro Infusion in Usia alignment, and during her Numa, a healer will be summoned. But if you prefer running a healer, you could swap Kazuha for Jean or swap your Hydro unit to a Hydro healer. In terms of damage, keeping Kazuha would be the better option. For more in-depth team building, I highly recommend checking out my C6 guide, although do note that there are some mistakes made. If you scroll down the comments, you will find a pinned comment highlighting the mistakes. And finally, should you go for her weapon or constellations? The answer and my recommendation is, you should go for her constellation. Her C1 alone makes her much more viable in teams with characters that don't consume their own HP. Her C2 makes her buff much easier to max. Splendor of Tranquil Waters, although a great weapon for her damage, does not affect your fanfare point generation, and with such great free-to-play options like Fleuve Cendre Ferryman not much behind, I don't see her weapon being better than Constellations, on top of her C1 being possibly cheaper than getting her weapon. But that's all from my Furina guide. I appreciate you watching till the end, and remember that Furina's kit is still subject to change. But that's all from me, and thank you for watching.